The apartment, once a sanctuary of shared purpose and quiet understanding, began to feel subtly off-kilter. It was a sensation akin to a perfectly level surface tilting ever so slightly, an imperceptible change that nonetheless registered deep within my senses. My wife, Genevieve, had always possessed a certain vibrancy, a lively energy that filled our shared spaces. But lately, that energy seemed to flicker, replaced by a nervous restlessness that manifested in small, almost unnoticeable ways. A sudden start at the sound of the doorbell, a lingering glance at her phone screen, a faint, unfamiliar scent that clung to her clothing, a fleeting expression that vanished before I could fully decipher it. I, Elias, an architect accustomed to scrutinizing the minutest details of design, found myself applying the same analytical lens to the subtle shifts in Genevieve's behavior. I noticed the way her eyes would dart away when I asked about her day, the way her laughter seemed forced, a mere echo of its former warmth. Our evenings, once filled with shared conversation and quiet intimacy, were now punctuated by long silences, broken only by the hum of the television or the tapping of her fingers on her phone. She would often claim she was working late or attending to urgent errands, but her explanations felt vague, lacking the usual precision and detail. I began to feel a growing sense of unease, a gnawing suspicion that something was amiss, something hidden beneath the surface of our seemingly perfect life. The air grew thick with unspoken questions, and the silence between us became a heavy, tangible presence. I felt as though I was observing a play where I knew the script, but the actors had started improvising, and the story was veering off course. I was a man who prided himself on control, on understanding the structure of things, and this creeping uncertainty, this sense of being adrift in a sea of unspoken emotions, was deeply unsettling. My architectural firm, known for its clean lines and functional elegance, often found itself in competition with Julian's. His style was a stark contrast to my own, flamboyant, ostentatious, and, in my opinion, lacking substance. Julian, with his theatrical gestures and booming voice, was a master of self-promotion, a man who built his reputation on spectacle rather than solid design. I had always viewed him as a rival, but a distant one, a mere annoyance in the grand scheme of my professional life. However, a series of seemingly coincidental encounters began to paint a different picture. I noticed Genevieve's name appearing on his client list, a fact she had neglected to mention. Then there were the chance meetings at art openings and gallery showings, events that Genevieve had suddenly developed a keen interest in attending. Each time, Julian was there, his presence radiating an unsettling familiarity with Genevieve. Their interactions were subtle, a shared glance, a whispered comment, but they carried an undercurrent that sent a chill through me. I began to observe Julian more closely, dissecting his every move, his every word. I saw the way his eyes lingered on Genevieve, the way he leaned in when he spoke to her, the way he seemed to command her attention without even trying. The more I observed, the more I became convinced that there was a connection between them, a hidden relationship that went beyond professional courtesy. The realization was like a cold, sharp blade, slicing through the carefully constructed veneer of my life. The man I had dismissed as a mere rival now loomed as a threat, a shadow that stretched across my marriage, casting a darkness I couldn't ignore. I started to perceive a pattern, a series of small, calculated moves that suggested a deliberate deception. It was as if a puzzle was being assembled before my eyes, a puzzle that revealed a picture I desperately didn't want to see. The subtle shifts and unsettling encounters were no longer mere suspicions. They solidified into a concrete, undeniable reality. One evening, Genevieve left her phone unattended on the kitchen counter. A notification flashed across the screen, a message from an unknown number. My heart pounded in my chest as I hesitantly picked up the device. The message was brief, a simple "thinking of you," but the sender's name, saved as J, was accompanied by a string of heart emojis. I scrolled through the preceding messages, each one a carefully crafted exchange of veiled affection and clandestine plans. They spoke of stolen moments, whispered promises, and a longing to escape the constraints of their current lives. The words were like shards of glass, piercing the illusion of our perfect marriage. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, a physical manifestation of the betrayal that had just been laid bare. The phone slipped from my grasp, clattering onto the countertop. I stared at the screen, the words blurring through the haze of shock and disbelief. I replayed the previous weeks in my mind, the missed calls, the late nights, the sudden changes in Genevieve's routine. Each piece of the puzzle fell into place, revealing a picture of calculated deceit. It wasn't just a fleeting indiscretion. It was a sustained, deliberate act of betrayal. I felt a coldness settle over me, a detachment from the emotions that threatened to overwhelm me. I knew then that I couldn't ignore the truth any longer. The carefully constructed foundation of our life together had crumbled, revealing the cracks and fissures that lay beneath. The anger, the hurt, the sense of violation, all swirled within me, a tempest of emotions that threatened to consume me. But beneath the chaos, a cold, calculating resolve began to form. I would not allow myself to be a victim. I would not let them dictate the terms of my life. I would find a way to navigate this betrayal, to reclaim my dignity, and to ensure that they faced the consequences of their actions. My training as an architect had instilled in me a meticulous approach to problem solving. Every project began with a blueprint, a carefully crafted plan that accounted for every detail. Now, I applied that same methodical approach to the situation at hand. My revenge wouldn't be a rash act of anger, but a carefully constructed edifice, a masterpiece of calculated retribution. I began to analyze the situation, dissecting the dynamics of their relationship, identifying their vulnerabilities, and mapping out their weaknesses. I needed to understand their motivations, their desires, and their fears. I started to gather information, discreetly observing their interactions, documenting their movements, and analyzing their digital footprints. I became a ghost in their lives, an unseen observer, meticulously collecting the pieces of their deception. I realized that their relationship was built on a foundation of vanity and ambition. Julian's flamboyant persona masked a deep insecurity, a desperate need for validation. Genevieve, in turn, was drawn to his perceived power and prestige, seeking an escape from the perceived monotony of our life. I understood that their bond was fragile, easily fractured by the slightest pressure. My plan would exploit these weaknesses, turning their strengths into liabilities, and their desires into their undoing. I would use their own tools against them, their ambition, their vanity, and their desire for control. I would become the architect of their downfall, meticulously designing a series of events that would expose their deception and dismantle their lives. I would not resort to physical confrontation or emotional outbursts. My revenge would be subtle, elegant, and devastatingly effective. I would build a structure of consequences, a monument to their betrayal, leaving them to dwell within its ruins. The first phase of my plan involved securing my financial future. I began by subtly diverting funds from our joint accounts, creating a complex network of offshore investments and shell corporations. It was a slow, methodical process designed to avoid detection. I meticulously documented every transaction, creating a trail of breadcrumbs that led nowhere. I consulted with lawyers and financial advisors, ensuring that my actions were both legal and untraceable. I established a new identity, a phantom persona that existed only in the digital realm. This alter ego allowed me to operate in the shadows, moving money, acquiring assets, and building a financial fortress that would be impervious to Genevieve's claims. I also began to subtly sabotage her own financial stability. I planted seeds of doubt about her investments, suggesting risky ventures and dubious schemes. I encouraged her to indulge in frivolous spending, subtly fueling her desire for material possessions. With each passing day, I tightened the financial noose, ensuring that she would be left with nothing but a mountain of debt and a tarnished reputation. It was a cold, calculated move, but I felt no remorse. They had betrayed my trust, and now they would pay the price. I was building a financial labyrinth, a maze of transactions and investments that would leave them lost and disoriented. It was a game of chess, and I was playing to win. While meticulously constructing my financial fortress and laying the groundwork for their downfall, I maintained the facade of a devoted husband. I continued to share meals with Genevieve, to engage in polite conversation, and to fulfill my domestic duties. I became a master of deception, my face a mask of serene indifference that concealed the turmoil brewing within. I attended social gatherings with her, smiling for the cameras and playing the role of the supportive spouse. I even accompanied her to events where I knew Julian would be present, observing their interactions with a detached amusement. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar, a carefully crafted illusion that kept suspicion at bay. I became adept at reading their body language, their subtle glances, and their veiled conversations. Each interaction provided me with valuable information, further fueling my resolve. At home, I created an atmosphere of normalcy. I cooked her favorite meals, maintained our shared spaces, and even surprised her with small gestures of affection. I knew that the more comfortable I made her, the less likely she was to suspect my true intentions. It was a delicate balancing act, a constant game of cat and mouse, but I relished the challenge. My outward composure was a shield, protecting me from the emotional onslaught of betrayal. It allowed me to function, to plan, and to execute my strategy without succumbing to despair. It was a performance that demanded every ounce of my self-control, but it was essential to the success of my plan. I was playing a long game, and I knew that patience and perseverance were my greatest allies. With my financial safeguards in place and the mask of domesticity firmly secured, I turned my attention to Julian. My goal was not to destroy him completely, not yet. Instead, I aimed to chip away at his foundations, to sow seeds of doubt that would slowly erode his reputation and credibility. I began by subtly undermining his professional standing. I leaked information about his projects to competitors, highlighting potential flaws and vulnerabilities. I planted rumors about his financial instability, suggesting that his lavish lifestyle was a facade masking a mountain of debt. I even hinted at ethical breaches, suggesting that he had compromised his integrity for personal gain. These whispers, carefully crafted and strategically disseminated, began to circulate within the industry. Clients became hesitant, investors grew wary, and Julian's carefully cultivated image began to tarnish. He found himself defending his designs, justifying his decisions, and fighting to maintain his grip on his clientele. The pressure began to mount, and cracks appeared in his once impenetrable armor. His confidence wavered, his bravado faltered, and the seeds of doubt I had planted began to take root. I watched his descent with a cold satisfaction. It was a slow, agonizing process, a gradual erosion of his power and prestige. He was like a magnificent building, structurally unsound, slowly crumbling under its own weight. I was the architect of his demise, the unseen hand guiding his downfall. The whispers of doubt I had sown about Julian were merely the prelude to a more dramatic act. I orchestrated a public exposé, a carefully calculated maneuver designed to shatter his reputation and expose his vulnerabilities. I anonymously leaked documents to a prominent architectural journal, revealing alleged instances of plagiarism in his designs. I fabricated evidence, manipulated data, and created a compelling narrative that cast him as a fraud, a charlatan who had built his career on stolen ideas. The publication of the exposé sent shockwaves through the architectural community. Julian's name was splashed across headlines, his designs were scrutinized, and his integrity was called into question. The media frenzy was relentless, fueled by a thirst for scandal and a fascination with fallen idols. Julian vehemently denied the allegations, but the damage was done. Clients abandoned him, investors withdrew their support, and his once thriving firm teetered on the brink of collapse. He became a pariah, ostracized by his peers and shunned by the industry he had once dominated. I watched his downfall from a distance, a silent observer of the chaos I had unleashed. It was a spectacle of my own creation, a public execution of a man who had dared to betray my trust. The satisfaction was profound, a vindication of my meticulous planning and calculated execution. Julian's fall from grace was swift and brutal. He was stripped of his awards, his projects were put on hold, and his name became synonymous with deceit and dishonesty. He was left with nothing but the remnants of his shattered reputation and the bitter taste of defeat. With Julian's public downfall underway, I shifted my focus back to Genevieve. My strategy now was one of emotional detachment, a slow and agonizing withdrawal that would leave her feeling isolated and abandoned. I became a ghost in our own home, a silent presence that haunted her every waking moment. I ceased all physical intimacy, creating a chasm between us that grew wider with each passing day. I responded to her attempts at conversation with monosyllabic answers, deflecting her questions and avoiding her gaze. I withdrew from shared activities, preferring to spend my evenings immersed in work or lost in solitary pursuits. I created an emotional vacuum, a void that sucked the joy and vitality out of our relationship. Genevieve became increasingly agitated, her anxiety growing with each unanswered question and unreturned affection. She tried to bridge the gap, to rekindle the intimacy we once shared, but I remained distant, unresponsive, a cold and unyielding presence. The once vibrant woman I had known was slowly fading away, replaced by a shadow of her former self. Her laughter became strained, her eyes lost their sparkle, and her once confident demeanor crumbled under the weight of my emotional neglect. I watched her unravel with a detached fascination, observing the subtle signs of her distress with a cold, analytical eye. It was a cruel tactic, a calculated infliction of emotional pain, but I felt no remorse. She had betrayed my trust, shattered our bond, and now she was experiencing the consequences of her actions. I was no longer the loving husband, the supportive partner. I had become the architect of her emotional demise, the creator of the abyss that now separated us. As Julian's world crumbled and the chasm between Genevieve and I widened, a new emotion began to take root in her: suspicion. The carefully constructed facade of my indifference started to crack under the weight of her scrutiny. She noticed the subtle changes in my behavior, the late nights at the office, the encrypted emails, the guarded phone calls. Her intuition, honed by years of shared intimacy, whispered that something was amiss. She began to question my motives, to probe for answers, to seek explanations for my emotional withdrawal. But I remained evasive, deflecting her inquiries with practiced ease. The seeds of doubt I had planted in her mind about Julian now began to blossom into a full-blown paranoia. She questioned his loyalty, his intentions, and his role in their shared downfall. The once unshakable trust between them eroded, replaced by suspicion and resentment. Genevieve's anxiety grew with each passing day. She became increasingly agitated, her sleep disturbed by nightmares and her waking hours plagued by doubt. She started to see connections where none existed, to interpret every word and gesture as a sign of my hidden agenda. I watched her descent into paranoia with a detached amusement. It was a slow, agonizing process, a gradual unraveling of her sanity. She was trapped in a web of her own making, a prisoner of her own guilt and fear. The once confident and self-assured woman was now a shadow of her former self, haunted by the consequences of her betrayal. She had become the architect of her own destruction, her suspicions fueling the fire that would ultimately consume her. The time had come to shed the mask of indifference and reveal the full extent of my knowledge. I chose a quiet evening, the apartment shrouded in an eerie stillness, to confront Genevieve with the truth. I laid out the evidence of her affair with Julian, the intercepted messages, the documented encounters, the meticulously compiled timeline of their deception. Her initial reaction was one of shock and disbelief. She stammered denials, attempted justifications, and pleaded for understanding. But I remained unmoved, my voice cold and steady as I recounted the details of her betrayal. I presented her with irrefutable proof, leaving no room for doubt or denial. The realization of my awareness hit her like a physical blow. The color drained from her face, her eyes widened in fear, and her body trembled with a mixture of shame and anger. The carefully constructed walls she had built around herself crumbled, revealing the raw vulnerability beneath. I watched her unravel with a detached satisfaction, the culmination of months of meticulous planning and calculated execution. The woman who had once held my heart, who had shared my life and my dreams, was now a stranger, exposed and vulnerable. The confrontation was brief but devastating. I left no room for reconciliation, no possibility of forgiveness. I had played the role of the betrayed husband to perfection, my performance flawless in its execution. Genevieve was left to face the consequences of her actions, alone and exposed. The weight of her betrayal crushed her spirit, leaving her with nothing but regret and despair. The unveiling was complete, the truth laid bare, and the seeds of her destruction sown. With the truth exposed, I initiated divorce proceedings. Armed with the meticulously documented evidence of Genevieve's infidelity and the intricate web of financial safeguards I had established, I entered the legal arena with unwavering confidence. My legal team, handpicked for their ruthlessness and expertise, launched a relentless assault, dismantling Genevieve's defenses and exposing her financial vulnerabilities. The courtroom became my new stage, a battleground where I wielded the law as a weapon. I presented myself as the wronged party, the victim of a calculated betrayal. My composure was unwavering, my testimony precise and damning. Genevieve, stripped of her financial security and burdened by the weight of her deceit, struggled to mount a credible defense. Her attempts to portray herself as a victim of circumstance were met with skepticism and disdain. The legal proceedings dragged on, a war of attrition that drained her emotionally and financially. With each passing hearing, her resolve weakened, her spirit broken by the relentless pressure. I watched her crumble with a cold detachment, my satisfaction growing with every legal victory. The woman who had once shared my life, my home, and my dreams was now reduced to a legal adversary, a pawn in my carefully orchestrated game of revenge. The final decree was a testament to my meticulous planning and strategic execution. Genevieve was left with nothing but a tarnished reputation and a mountain of debt. The legal battlefield had been won, and I emerged victorious, my vengeance complete. The legal victory was merely the first act in my campaign of retribution. I now turned my attention to the court of public opinion, determined to ensure that Genevieve and Julian faced the full consequences of their actions. I carefully orchestrated a media campaign, leaking select details of their affair to the press, painting Genevieve as a manipulative adulteress and Julian as an opportunistic predator. The tabloids had a field day, their pages filled with salacious headlines and scandalous revelations. Genevieve's reputation was dragged through the mud, her name synonymous with infidelity and deceit. Julian, already reeling from his professional downfall, was further vilified, his image tarnished beyond repair. Social media became a weapon in my arsenal, a platform for disseminating gossip and fueling public outrage. Anonymous accounts, created under my direction, spread rumors and innuendo, amplifying the scandal and ensuring its longevity. Genevieve and Julian became pariahs, ostracized by their social circles and shunned by the community they had once inhabited. Their friends distanced themselves, their colleagues whispered behind their backs, and their families were left to deal with the fallout. The public shaming was relentless, a constant barrage of criticism and condemnation. Genevieve's once vibrant social life evaporated, replaced by isolation and loneliness. Julian, stripped of his professional and social standing, retreated into the shadows, a broken man haunted by the ghosts of his past. I watched their public demise with a cold satisfaction, the culmination of months of meticulous planning and calculated execution. They had betrayed my trust, shattered my world, and now they were paying the price. The public shaming was complete, their reputations irrevocably tarnished, their lives forever marked by the scandal. Genevieve and Julian found themselves adrift in the wreckage of their former lives. Their careers were shattered, their reputations destroyed, and their social circles decimated. They were left to navigate a world that had turned against them, a landscape of empty ruins where their past transgressions echoed in every interaction. Genevieve, once a socialite and a figure of admiration, now found herself isolated and ostracized. The whispers followed her, the judgmental glances pierced her, and the weight of public condemnation pressed down on her with relentless force. She became a recluse, retreating into the confines of a small, rented apartment, a stark contrast to the luxurious life she once led. Julian, stripped of his professional prestige and financial security, became a shadow of his former self. His flamboyant persona faded, replaced by a hollow shell of a man, haunted by the specter of his past failures. He found himself alone, abandoned by the very people he had once sought to impress. They were left to confront the consequences of their actions, the empty spaces in their lives a constant reminder of what they had lost. The once vibrant tapestry of their lives had been reduced to threads, frayed and broken, unable to be rewoven. The emptiness was a constant companion, a chilling reminder of the lives they had destroyed and the trust they had betrayed. They were left to dwell in the ruins of their own making, a testament to the destructive power of deceit and the enduring nature of retribution. With the echoes of their downfall fading into silence, I found myself alone. The meticulously crafted edifice of my revenge stood complete, a testament to my calculated precision and unwavering resolve. Yet, as I surveyed the wreckage, a sense of emptiness washed over me. The satisfaction of vengeance, once so potent, now felt hollow and fleeting. The silence in the apartment was deafening, a stark contrast to the vibrant life it once held. The ghosts of shared laughter and whispered secrets lingered in the empty rooms, a constant reminder of what I had lost. I had achieved my objective, but at what cost? The emotional toll of my elaborate scheme was undeniable. The years of suppressed anger, the calculated detachment, and the relentless pursuit of retribution had left their mark. I had become a stranger to myself, a man defined by his vengeance, his identity inextricably linked to the downfall of others. The architect of their destruction had also become the architect of his own isolation. The future stretched before me, an uncertain landscape devoid of the familiar comforts of companionship and trust. The path ahead was uncharted, the destination unknown. I had won the battle, but the war within raged on. The scars of betrayal ran deep, a constant reminder of the fragility of human connection and the enduring power of the past. The architect, once a master builder of dreams, was now left to confront the ruins of his own creation, a solitary figure in the twilight of his triumph.